This is a very interesting topic, and I have to make a confession. I am very biased. So, I have to be careful to hide my bias, because if I was in a panel, jury panel, I would excuse myself and walk out, because my decisions would be biased. So we have this purpose over pace is work hard, retire early, obsolete. And I think generally the government likes to increase our retirement age, because the longer you work, the more you contribute to social security and the general funding for the government. And for those of you who may not be aware, whatever you contribute to social security doesn't go into any account. It just goes into the government's revenue to spend on that year. And eventually whatever they pay comes out of general fund. So there's no connection between the payouts and the pay-ins in social security. So the longer you work, the more the money government gets to spend. That's just a fact of life. But as an individual, to me the question always is this: okay, you worked. Most of us started working, maybe in high school, part-time, mowing the lawn, taking care of some kids, or dropping newspapers as middle school children where the dad drove you around. But you really started working full-time once you completed college and got into the workforce. And of course, you worked part-time during college to pay for your tuition, etc. So you had a long life of work, maybe 40, 50 years. And depending on how much you like your work, you're counting the days to retirement. And hopefully, you are enjoying what you're doing. And therefore, you're not exactly anxious to retire. And then comes the choice. Do you continue to work or do you retire early? Let's see what each of you have to say on your personal opinions on that.
Okay, Joe Frankie here, and I'm going to approach it from one of my careers. You know, I've retired about 4 or 5 times because you find something else you want to do. And one of them is, and I still do it, I just don't chase it, is executive search. So I run across people frequently that really have been what you would call extremely successful. They have the money. And, you know, what I find is after about a year, year and a half, they come around again and say, okay, this isn't working. You know, I'm not satisfied. You know, I'm not in the game. I'm not in the hunt. I'm not getting emotionally what I thought I would get, you know, by retiring early. So then they're exploring different ways, either to serve in significance as part of a nonprofit activity, or create companies where they can ideally give back, or if they just want to just get back in the mix again, create a company that is going to be, you know, their goal is to make it extremely profitable and they can do what they want to do. And so you see the whole range, but what I've seen is most people, after a short time, the idea of retiring and not doing anything doesn't work. I've also seen people that have retired from careers and not getting involved in something, and next thing you know is 5 years they put on 10 pounds, 10 years another, you know, 15, then the first heart deal. And so the most successful people I have seen and have been mentored are 85-plus-year-old people with 3 jobs. And a lot of them aren't what I'd consider formally educated. In other words, they didn't go to college. They figured it out. They ran companies, and they're still running companies geared on the idea that they're creating their time that they want. In other words, I watched my father-in-law up till 89, you know, run 3 companies, and he had all the time in the world to travel because he was the one in charge, you know, of how he supported these particular activities. So I'd be happy to talk about that if people are interested.
Okay. Hi. Actually, I founded my company in Philippines. It's an ecosystem of real estate, agriculture, and tourism. And one that I'm doing at is actually I'm developing a retirement village there. So I I think that it's not obsolete. It's actually evolving. What we're doing there is creating a purpose to the Filipino and foreign people to have a deeper meaning in their sunset of their life. And what we're also doing is I speak this yesterday in my keynote speaking engagement that um, that retirement should be enjoyed, and those people should have more purpose. Just what my colleague here says about that. Um, you must have a deeper purpose with that, and you must enjoy. So that's what we're developing there. And uh, for me, uh, we created a lot of clients in our real estate development that they're enjoying and having a purpose for our development. So that's it.
Okay. The point that has come out very clearly here, and I'm so glad it's aligned to what I believe, is you need to first understand what is retirement. Retirement is not the end of your life. Retirement is retiring from a function that you've been doing until now. You might be a full-time school teacher, you retire. But then you become a tutor and you start teaching kids in your neighborhood. And that is post-retirement, but it's a matter of opinion, it's just another job. You moved from full-time school teacher to part-time school teacher. My friend's father was an ophthalmologist, and he was 81. He stopped doing full-time practice of eye care, but he ran his clinic part-time for free. Anybody who came from with a referral from a non-profit, from a charitable, or they know they're working in somebody's home with limited finances, he would treat them and also give them the medication they need so that they do not have to be deprived of vision care. Was he retired? Well, it depends what your definition of retirement is. If I'm not retired, as long as I'm making money, forgive me for being a little coarse, all my life I've prostituted my mind to put food on the table. But when I don't need to do that, and I still continue to work, I don't believe I've retired. I don't believe I will retire until I drop dead. I expect to drop dead on my shoes, because that is where the purpose comes. As long as you can contribute something, make someone's lives better, then there's no reason for you to retire. As a good friend of mine who has been the governor of Virginia once, he said, yeah, I'll rest when I'm dead. Until then, I'll keep working and I'll do good stuff to make the world a better place. Because what we need to understand is we human beings are not a light switch. Right now, you flip the switch, the lights will go. That's not what happens to us, unless you have a heart attack and drop dead. Most people, that doesn't happen, and therefore, it is critical that one has a purpose in life. And many people have this thing, oh, I'm so busy working, I have no time for doing anything outside of work. I cannot volunteer. I cannot get involved with a place of worship. I cannot mentor kids. I'll do all that when I'm retired. And I believe you mentioned about working for a non-profit and supporting them and so on, volunteering for a non-profit. If you decide to do that after you retire, I can guarantee you it's going to fail. Because the mindset in a non-profit is completely different from the mindset in a corporate world. To a large extent, because when you have volunteers, theoretically there is no hierarchy. But in reality there is. Somebody is more equal than the others. So this is something you need to get used to in your work life when you are in a position of authority, and then you go and volunteer and you listen to somebody less capable than you and follow their instructions. That you need to grow up with. So these are some of the things that typically people miss. So would you like to share some of your experiences on non-profits work?
Okay, but let me kind of look at this is how I see the world. Um, we are just at it 24/7, 365. You get married, you raise your kids, you're saving for college, you're trying to pay for a house, and all those kind of things. And you finally get to the point where you think you have that behind you. Now you're an empty nester, the kids are out. So you're at a point in your life where it's like the halftime at a football game. The first half was all about driving success, whatever that was, and that's different for each people. Then the second half, what is the game plan for significance? How are you going to be significant? And one of the things that, I encourage and coach people on is you can still be significant. You can have a company, you can have a consulting business where you control your time now because you're not working for the man, you're working for yourself. And so you can kind of build all the things that you kind of missed in the success phase around all the things you want to do now. And the people that do that seem to be extremely successful. You're right about the nonprofit things. I'm involved in some nonprofits, and you just have to accept the fact that everybody is a volunteer, and instead of you're working from the very best, you're kind of working at the lowest common denominator. And at the end of the day, if you've got some position of authority in a nonprofit, you're the chief doer. And I hope that helps.
Okay. For me, my company is actually a social enterprise. What we do there is, for example, the goal of the company, our goal is to really bring back Filipino people to the going back, retiring in our development and real estate. So what we do is all our retiree would go into a social and environmental location, and they actually like it, having a connection with other retirees. We create a program for the whole year, and it actually create a purpose to them all year round. And then we created a personal assistant to them, creating a strong customer-centric approach with them. So for me, I will go back to the values and making them having a purpose in their life, and also enjoying the environment and having a social connection with other peoples. So that's the part of what we're doing there. That's why I also love this topic, because it's really what we're doing in our country.
Thank you. This earlier sometime, I don't know, this one or the previous, and I forget, I'm kind of lose tracking of when. But I did say that there are no coincidences in my life. Everything is providential. And this is one of them. Because we live in the United States, and I'm sure every one of you, and even in other countries, now I find even the Philippines, you have these retirement communities. My confession, you can't pay me to live in one of those. Do you know why? You are the most wonderful people out there. But I'll tell you my experience with a gentleman about 20 years ago. He was 87 years old, and he was almost flat like a book, slightly bent forward, that's all. And he was living in an assisted living facility, and I have an apartment where he wanted to move in, and we met. And he said, this place is really nice. The people are very caring. They give fairly good food. I enjoy the food. And every week they give us an evening, they play a game or something, give us entertainment. It's a little expensive. I can afford it. But you know what? He lowered his voice. I hate it. And I said, okay, John, what's the problem? He said, you see that window? It's a nice bay window, nice and sunny. He said, I like to sit in the morning and read my paper or something. And every day, do you know what I see? The ambulance comes with flashing lights. Somebody gets in, goes out. And I just found out that Mary took ill and she's gone. And half the time, Mary or whoever does not come back. It's a constant reminder of when it's going to be my turn. To live in this, waiting to see when it's your number, is not the life I want. So he said, I want to move into this independent living home of yours. So he moved. And I met him about 2 months later. He said, oh my God, my life has changed. I'm so happy. I do my own little cooking. Some food I get from a restaurant. And then I talk to Elizabeth here, and there is Paul here. We're having such a blast. I'm so happy. This was in the month of August. And then around October 3rd or 4th, I get a phone call. And he says, oh, I'm sorry to tell you, John passed away. I said, oh my God, I just deposited his rent check. He said, yeah, he was very particular on the 26th of September in a very scrawly hand, like a chicken scratch. He had signed the check and mailed it out to me. He said he was very particular, it has to be mailed. I said, oh, I'm going to miss him. You're such a nice person. He said, yeah, but I need to mail you another check. I said, what for? He said, well, John died. I said, yeah, he just sent me a check and he's not in the apartment. He said, yeah, but he didn't give you notice. So he has instructed me to send you a check for 1 month's rent as notice rent because he's getting out of the apartment and breaking the lease. Now that is what a highly ethical professional person thinks. And the fact is, he reinforced my belief that you do not want to live in a depressing environment. So for the last several years, I've been planning to build a multi-family, multi-generation community where a third of it will be older people, like us. A third of it will be young professionals like most of you. And the other third will be county workers like a school teacher, policeman, fireman, clerical staff who cannot afford to live in the city or county where they work. And which of you want your child's school teacher to be driving for an hour and 30 minutes in bad traffic, come to school, and then teach? My daughter was a teacher. And she was young. She was 23 years old, 22, 23. She didn't want to live with us in our house and drive. She said, hey, when I was in high school, I used to drive 45 minutes to go to school because she went to a school out of the, away from our home school, in a special governor's school. And she said, I'm not going to drive for an hour going to teach because I cannot afford to be late. And I can't deal with the traffic. And so she lived close to her school. Fortunately, she could afford to do it because of circumstances. A lot of teachers who are married, who have families and not that affluent can't afford to do it. But the moment you bring the youth, the children, the teachers into your community, the old people have great opportunity. A child comes back from school, sit in the cafeteria, they get their snacks, help them with their homework, help them prepare for their exams, and then you reward the child when come back with great grades. Or it didn't work, it's okay, honey, don't worry, you worked hard, that's all that matters. Here's a reward for you. Next time you'll do better. Encourage them, mentor them. I would pay to do this. And this is why I want to build it. And who is this panelist I've never met before? That's exactly the world he is in, the Philippines. And this is what happens. And this again comes back to purpose over pace. We are working hard to put food on the table. That is the pace component. Purpose is what we do because we are passionate. And while you're working, where you volunteer is your purpose. The working, I already told you what it is. You're doing something with your mind, brains to put food on the table. What you do out of love, to please yourself, to get more positive energy so you can deal with the crap in your workplace next week, that is your purpose. So what would you say is your primary purpose now?
I'd say my primary purpose is basically to help people get what they want. So I'm an executive coach. I've coached 735 people in 15 different countries. So they were either executives, veterans, or students. The youngest is 14 years old, trying to get into a very special high school. The oldest was 84 and wanted back in the workforce, and we got him there. So what I've, in the fact that I do that, can you imagine what I've learned from 735 different people? It's amazing. So what it did is just kept sharpening my blade. You know, I finally wrote a book on how to use LinkedIn to get what you want. It's called LinkedIn, the 5-Minute Drill for Executive Networking Success. I wrote it with a female co-author, and it's the hardest thing I ever did, to write a book that's 1 hour in length. And you know, you find your way to give back, and if you can do it and kind of make a living at it, more power to you. So I am fortunate that the things I'm doing now are my passions, and I kind of get paid for my passion. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't look at it as work, you know.
Thank you. And it's a mindset. Everything is a mindset. You can make everything passionate. Sometimes the economics of life force you to do something you're not passionate about. Tough luck. You can still find other things. How about your experience, sir?
Yeah, for me, my purpose, right? My primary I actually, the retirement village that we created, we expanded for 1,000 retirement owners for just in the span of 5 years. And we saw that on how the business model really works, that creating a co-housing and also having a medical security, and also this is the purpose that we're doing right now there. For me, my primary purpose is to really integrate that business model and to really create a strong retirement communities. I call it an ecosystem of communities. So right now, as maybe at my age, my primary purpose is to really expand my vision and plans and share it to the world. But we are doing a very miraculous thing there, and that's why retirement is it's really an industrial age. Right now, what we really want is to have a deeper meaning. That's why there we have a faith and environmental stewardship and creating a partnership with our people. And probably that's it.
About 70 years ago in India, very soon after India got its independence, my wife's father got a scholarship and he went to study in Wales. And he studied there and then came back. He joined the Indian Administrative Service, worked for the government, different parts, and so on. And back in 1984, after my wife and I got married, we went to Wales and visited some of his friends there who were with him when he was working and when he was studying there. And we went to a well in that village, and that well had a little sign which said, "Leave this a better place than you found it." Even now I get the chills when I just mentioned it to you, because if you make this a primary application of your life, the purpose of your life is to leave every place you set foot on a better place than you found it. You will find your magic. You will not care about what anybody thinks or does. You will be so happy with just what you're doing with no expectation of return, but just what can I do to help you? That's priceless. So one of the things every one of us should do is, I'm sure you have all learned lessons over the years. Make a note of it, share it with young people. Share it with the children today, your youth today. Because today the greatest purpose for every one of us is to mentor and guide our youth. Because now I believe we are in the Gen Alpha. The Gen Z is over, now we have the Gen Alpha. There are so many of these nomenclatures for children and people born. By and large, their values are different, their systems are different, their pressures are different, everything is different. And more of what we grew up with, which made us what we are, is being forgotten. And unfortunately, the political environment around the world is totally messed up. If any of you can think of one country, say, wow, this country is doing fantastic, I'd love to hear that story once we are done here. Because everywhere I see confusion, personal greed, and total disregard of community. So, any thoughts on what we as ordinary mortals can do to make our world, our environments better?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the standpoint that everywhere you're at, anything that you do, you try to leave it in a better place. And I noticed that, I've left various professions and I still get the calls to do executive search and that kind of stuff. And And I've continued to do that because that keeps me in the market. I see what the market's doing. So to properly advise young people, executives, veterans, you have to know what the market is doing. And so I think your advice is what we all should do. We all have a moral responsibility to try to do things a little better for everybody, all types of people. We all have our own gifts, and we try to use those gifts in the God-given way that they were given. And I think if we do that, we're well ahead.
How much time do we have? Coming kind of towards. Okay, do you have any final words to say, and then we'll throw it open for questions?
Yeah, everything you say, there are a lot of wisdom. But for me, I would just add, create an impact in your life until your last breath. So I think they already said a lot of wisdom from these guys.
Thank you. Any questions or suggestions from any of you? There must be something you can see. You're all younger, and what would you like to do once you give up your full-time employment? Or more importantly, what are you doing now while you're full-time employed? Where do you go to relax and just feel good? Any one of you? Yes, miss. Let me give you a microphone. We can't hear you.
Claudia's got one.
Okay. To answer your question, for me, it's coming to these conferences, sharing my experience, and at the same time learning. I guess, at the point where I am in my career, I'm young, and I'm still building my career, but I'm giving back in the little way, with the little I know, doing what I do. And I'm a pharmacist, and I love what I do. So I consult a little bit on the side, too, and, just sharing my knowledge, yeah.
Thank you, miss. As the Holy Book said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And this was reinforced to me by a young woman who gave me a T-shirt the second time I met her. The first time I met, she's about my daughter's age, grew very close. She came back to me with a shirt which said in the front, "Plus we give." And the back of the shirt said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." Anything, sir? You have any comments to make?
The thoughts that you said, right? There is a lot of discussions about work-life balance, right? So, in my age, I have not thought about retirement, but with what you guys were sharing, are we looking like at work-life balance a little too much, or how do you see it?
I see two phases. Alan and I have all been in the success phase, okay, and that's where young people are going through till you get to your late 40s or 50s, and your children are grown, you've got them out of the house, and so now you have some options about what you want to decide. Say you're retiring, or you've left, the grind that made you successful. So how are you going to create a business on either what you know or what your gifts are? And so that's what I decided to do, and my wife helped me with that. She says, you're in this executive search business, and people are calling you at 5 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock at night, and they want help with their resume and their LinkedIn profile. And the company won't let you talk to them during work hours because they consider them job seekers, and they're the lowest form of life that exists on the planet, except for once in a while they're candidates, and then they're the highest life form on the planet. So I always used to tell people, call me before breakfast, I'll try to have lunch with you, or I'll meet you after work. So the first batch of people I helped, they all got their interviews, and they did well. They got jobs, and so they told their family and friends. And so, I mean, the phone was ringing everywhere. Everybody wanted help. And my wife said, either go back to your day job, or why don't you make a business out of this? And I said, who would pay for this? And I said, why would you say to me something like that? And she said, I'm listening to you talk to these people, and you sound like you're developing officers in the Army. And all of a sudden, it was a blinding flash of the obvious that all I'd done in the Army was develop people. You help them get to their next assignment, you help them get to their next school, you help them get to their next promotion, and that's what the civilian world is all about. You got to get to the next thing, because the only way you get rewarded in the success cycle is usually you have to be given more responsibility, or more responsibility is more money, right? Or more benefits, or that kind of thing. And so that's what I did, is I started a coaching, career development, career transition business, and ended up writing a book on how to use LinkedIn to get what you want. The people that I've worked, clients way back when, they still call me and say, hey, find me a CEO, find me a CFO, and that kind of thing. And so last year, my wife said, hey, I want to travel. I said, okay. So we experimentally said, well, can I work and travel? So the deal was she has to drive, and I work the computer and the headset from the passenger seat. And we did a month and no skip of the beat, and so now we're traveling more and that. So that's an example of how I didn't even realize at the time that that was a gift. Somebody else had to show me, and it was like I called it a blinding flash of the obvious. The first time you see it, it's been there. And I think everybody has these abilities and gifts. You just need a way to explore them, and you reach a point where you can shift. So I'm doing exactly the things that I love to do. So my work is not work. I can't wait to talk to the next person and help the next person. Or, I'm at the point where people call me and say, hey, Joe, I know you've solved a problem like this before. Can we come to a consulting arrangement? And then all these people I've coached, the 735, they're coming back the second time, the third time, because they're at a different stage in their life and they're wanting more feedback.
Thank you. So that is a great question. And I'll just take a minute and close. It's a finale question that is awesome, and we are just about end of time. Yesterday, I was in a panel which was very similar to what you said, but they used different terminology.
Right.
They said, what's the professional and personal life balance for senior people in senior positions? I have a very simple answer. Work-life balance I prefer. For me, without work, there is no life. So there's no question of balance. It's a question of how much time you put in. Realistically, I live in 24/7. I almost feel like the British Empire. I hope I don't go the way of the British Empire. But the British Empire said the sun never sits on the British Empire. I work with people in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, California. I live in Washington, D.C. I have got phone calls at 4 o'clock from the British Embassy in Morocco saying, hey, there's this guy with a letter from you saying he needs to get a visa. Did you sign it? I said, yeah, I did. If I didn't answer the call at 4 o'clock, that guy would not have got his visa, and I'll be spending money to send him back to the embassy. So unfortunately, in today's age, we are working 24/7, which doesn't mean you're working 24 times 7 hours in a year, even a week. You're not working 168 hours. You're on call, unfortunately. That is reality. And I mentioned earlier, please do not wait to retirement to say you'll give your time volunteering. You can coach kids in whatever skill you have. Talking, walking, riding a bicycle, playing a game, playing chess, reading books, playing a musical instrument, knitting, sewing, cooking. There is no end to it. If you don't have a skill, develop a skill. Pay money to somebody, develop a skill, and then share it with children who don't have it. You'll find how your life changes, and hopefully we'll meet again in a year, and you'll pay me something, say, wow, you'll take me out for dinner, saying what a benefit my life has changed. So on that pleasant note of expecting a dinner from you next year, I'll hand it over to our MC. Thank you, ma'am.